There is a strange law at work in your life. It is not taught in schools. It is not written in any contract, but it shapes your story with the same power as gravity shapes the earth. This law says, what you don't face will return. It may return in the face of a stranger, in the voice of a partner, in the silence of a room. But it will return, again and again, until you finally meet it. Carl Jung called it the compulsion to repeat. He saw how people who avoided their pain re-encountered it in relationships, in career choices, in family patterns. Different faces, same wound, new seasons, same ache. It's like walking in circles emotionally, even as life changes on the outside. You grow older, but inside, the same knot remains. And maybe you've felt this too. You meet someone new, but the heartbreak feels familiar. You try a new path, but the fear returns with a different name. You leave places, people, jobs, yet end up in the same emotional landscape. This isn't coincidence. This is the soul's way of saying, what you avoid does not disappear. It waits. It waits for a moment of stillness. It waits for when your strength wears down. It waits not to punish but to heal, because pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And the deeper truth is, behind every repeated pain is a part of your soul trying to come home. So if you've been asking, why does this keep happening to me? The answer may be, because you're still avoiding the message beneath the pain. Today, we'll explore the invisible cycles of your story, the emotional echoes that come disguised as fate, the hidden law that repeats what you reject, not as punishment, but as an invitation, and how, through the lens of Jung and the sacred scriptures, you can finally break the cycle and come back to yourself. There is a secret architecture within your psyche, an inner blueprint designed not just to survive, but to complete what was left unfinished. Carl Jung called this pattern the repetition compulsion, a cycle where the unconscious recreates old wounds in new scenarios. Until you consciously face them, you think you're choosing freely. You think the next relationship, job, city, or friend will be different, but the same core emotion returns. Why? Because the unconscious doesn't forget. It stores everything, especially what was too painful, shameful, or frightening to process, and it brings those things back, not randomly, but symbolically. What you don't grieve becomes the grief of your child. What you don't speak becomes the silence in your marriage. What you don't feel becomes the numbness in your body. What you don't forgive becomes the anger you project on strangers. Jung called this accumulation of rejected parts the shadow. Not evil, not demonic, but unlived, unloved, unintegrated. And the shadow doesn't vanish with age. It doesn't disappear with diplomas, titles, or accomplishments. It lives behind the scenes, waiting for a chance to be seen. That's why certain moments trigger you more than others. Not because they're objectively worse, but because they touch the wound you buried. And here's the painful paradox. The more you avoid your pain, the more it directs your life. You don't just repeat your childhood, you become the parent you once feared. You attract the partners you once promised you'd avoid. You create the chaos you swore you'd never live again. This is not weakness, it's unconscious loyalty to the unresolved, and it continues until the soul says, enough. Jung believed that the goal of life was not to be happy, but to become whole. And wholeness only comes when we face the wound that split us. You can escape everything, except yourself. And the shadow you run from today is the fate you repeat tomorrow. But there's hope, because in every repetition lies a hidden key, a moment to pause, a moment to ask, where have I felt this before? And in that question, you don't just remember the pain, you reclaim the part of you that was lost when the pain first arrived. There comes a moment when the roles you've played begin to suffocate you. The strong one, the peaceful one, the productive one, the one who got over it. But the persona, that mask you wear to survive, eventually becomes too heavy to carry. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. You give, but feel secretly resentful. You succeed, but feel strangely empty. You act like everything is fine, because it has to be. Because if you fall apart, who will catch you? And yet this is where exhaustion begins, in the performance, in the pressure to maintain a version of yourself that is not fully true. Carl Jung knew that the persona, while socially necessary, becomes a prison when it silences the deeper voice within. You begin to live outside of yourself, in the expectations of others, in the roles that feel safe, in the patterns you don't question. But the soul always remembers. It remembers the moment you silenced your cry. It remembers the room where you were not seen. It remembers the day you decided it was safer to hide. And so it begins to whisper, through fatigue, through frustration, through inexplicable sadness. The soul doesn't yell. It waits, in silence, for you to return. This return is not dramatic. It doesn't require quitting your job or moving to a monastery. It begins quietly, in the moment you withdraw from the noise. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to be understood. You stop fighting for a version of love that requires self-betrayal. You choose solitude, not as escape, but as realignment. This is the emotional retreat, the holy silence where you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin asking, "What part of me have I abandoned?" You remove the mask, not because you're ready, but because you're tired of suffocating. You let the tears come, not to feel weak, but to finally feel honest. You step back, not because you're giving up, but because you're ready to come home. And in that sacred stillness, the persona fades, and the self begins to speak again, not with grand ideas, but with a simple truth. You don't have to pretend anymore. There is a story in the Bible that seems to echo this exact cycle of pain, silence, and return. It is the story of Jacob, a man who, from his very birth, was entangled in deception, conflict, and the hunger to be someone else. Jacob spent much of his life running from his brother, running from the consequences of his lies, running from the truth of who he was. But one night, everything changed. Alone in the desert, far from everything he had built, Jacob had a strange encounter, a wrestling with a figure that seemed human and divine. The text says he wrestled through the night and refused to let go until he was blessed. But here's the deeper truth. He wasn't wrestling with God in the way we imagine. He was wrestling with his shadow, the part of himself he had run from all his life, the liar, the manipulator, the wounded child, the soul that longed to be seen but feared being unworthy. And in that moment of confrontation, Jacob was wounded, his hip dislocated, a symbolic rupture of the persona he had built. From that night on, he walked with a limp. But he also walked with a new name, Israel, the one who wrestles with God and survives. This is the divine pattern. You cannot become who you were meant to be without facing what you were trying to forget. The pain you avoided becomes your night of wrestling. The fear you buried becomes the terrain of sacred encounter, and only when you stop running does the blessing reveal itself. But make no mistake, the blessing doesn't come without a wound, because healing isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone new, someone honest, someone whole, someone who knows, "I met God, and it cost me my old self." Jacob didn't leave that desert the same, and neither will you. When you face your hidden pain, when you allow the silence to speak, when you finally name what was unspoken, you don't just get clarity, you get rebirth. Something quiet happens when you finally stop running. At first, it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like collapse, like all the energy spent avoiding, hiding, repressing, suddenly has nowhere else to go. And that's when the shift begins, because once the pain is no longer your enemy, It becomes your guide. Carl Jung believed that the self is not born from comfort. It is forged through confrontation with the unconscious. It is not given. It is remembered, reclaimed, reintegrated. And the integration doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you are no longer split from it. You begin to see that your wounds were not meant to shame you. They were meant to initiate you. You start to notice how everything you resisted, every pattern that frustrated you, every breakdown that confused you, was your soul trying to find its way back. Back to center. Back to coherence. Back to a truth too sacred to be rushed. The Stoics called this living according to nature, but not just the nature outside, the nature within, the blueprint of your being. Integration is when you no longer need to pretend. You no longer need to force joy or mimic strength. You begin to live from a place that is quiet but powerful, soft but unbreakable. It is the return to the self, the divine image within you, the voice beneath the noise, the stillness that never left. And here's the miracle. You don't have to solve everything. You just have to stop denying what is, because the moment you accept what hurt you, you disarm it. You name it. You cradle it. You let it breathe. And in that embrace, you are no longer the child of your pain. You become the parent of your healing. That is integration, not perfection, not invincibility, but a sacred wholeness where nothing needs to be hidden anymore. You are not your trauma. You are not your avoidance. You are not your patterns. You are the one who noticed, the one who stayed, the one who returned. If you made it this far, it means something in you is ready, not just ready to understand, but ready to stop the repetition. Because deep healing is not about becoming someone new, it's about stopping the cycle of becoming who you are not. The pain that once haunted you is not here to punish you. It's here to reveal you, to return you, to remind you of the parts of yourself you locked away just to survive. But survival is not your destiny. Wholeness is. And the moment you stop running, stop blaming, stop outsourcing your meaning, you will feel it. The pattern breaks, the wheel slows down, the future stops being a repetition of the past. This is the invitation, to look your wound in the eye and say, "You will not define me. You will not drive me. You will not repeat through me." Because the repetition ends when the silence is broken, when the hidden becomes honored, when the soul is seen. And if this message stirred something within you, if you felt your past echoing in these words, then leave this in the comments. The cycle ends with me. Let it be your vow, your declaration, your silent rite of passage into freedom. Not because you figured it all out, but because you finally stopped pretending you didn't feel it. The self doesn't need explanations. It only needs your return. And if you're here, then the return has already begun.